A daily dose of practical wit and wisdom with a professional educator and trainer, Amazon best-selling author, United States Marine, television and radio host, Paul G. Markel. Each episode will focus on positive and productive ways to strengthen your mindset and help you improve your relationships, career goals, and overall well-being. Please welcome your host, Paul G. Markel.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Morning Mindset. I am, once again, still remain your host, Paul G. Markel. Today, we're going to talk about the difference between leaders or bosses. Now, we've talked a little bit about leadership up to this point in time, but we're going to focus really heavily on leadership and leadership qualities during the next 2 weeks. And there's a very important reason behind that. Number one, I believe that the United States of America right now has a critical shortage of leaders. And I don't mean politicians, and I don't mean bosses, and I don't mean those who have been put in charge of us. I mean genuine leaders. Now, many of you out there have seen the posters, especially at your workplace, a boss says or a leader says or what have you, the various motivational posters that you can buy online and put up in the break rooms and so forth. But is there a genuine difference between a leader and a boss? Or are we just really, splitting hairs? Now, again, when I was in the United States Marine Corps, I was given a leadership position. I was put in a leadership position relatively early on. I was a Lance Corporal. And a Lance Corporal, for those of you who don't know, is an E3, which is a relatively low rank in the military. But back when I was in, they didn't have a whole lot of money to pay people. Promotions mean money. I mean, promotions also, they mean responsibility and leadership and so forth, but they also mean money. And it was pretty tough to get promoted back in the mid-'80s, especially in the United States Marine Corps. And so what you had quite often is you had people of lower ranks, such as an E3, like a Lance Corporal, performing the job that normally a corporal, which is an E4, would be doing. And then you had very similar situations. A corporal would be doing the job of a sergeant and so on and so forth. So when I was a Lance Corporal, if you've ever been in the military, I was a senior Lance, right? I was a Lance Corporal that had some experience behind him. And I was put in charge of a team of 4 individuals. So there was myself and 4 other guys, and I was their leader. At the time, I was probably 21, 22 age range, and I had 4 people underneath me who I was responsible for. I was responsible for being their leader, not their boss. Now, technically, since I was put in a leadership or as I was a squad leader or team leader, that's what I was called. I was called a team leader on the USS Forrestal. And so I had the legitimate authority, but you're not supposed to just rest on that authority. Say, well, I'm in charge, so you have to. And I remember when we were going through our leadership coaching, our staff sergeants and sergeants would coach we young guys about how to be a leader. And we had to learn all of the 14 United States Marine Corps leadership traits and memorize them and discuss them and understand what they all meant so that we could be effective leaders. Now, you don't become an effective leader overnight. It takes time. You actually want to take the time to coach your leaders, to start them out small, and then build upon that. You don't just hand someone a leadership position and say, okay, you're in charge of 100 people today. You shouldn't. That's not the way you should do it. Now, I remember having a little poster or what have you in the Marine detachment, and it said things like this. A boss says, I. A leader says, we. A boss depends on their authority. A leader depends on goodwill. All right. A boss inspires fear, but a leader generates enthusiasm and so forth. A boss says, go do it. And a leader says, let's get it done. And so on and so forth. And you guys, like I said, you've probably seen them. But I really genuinely believe as I sit here in my studio talking into my Zoom recorder so that you guys can hear this, that in the United States of America today, we have a genuine crisis in leadership. We have our bosses, and we have authority figures, and we have politicians who've created bureaucracies, and they tell us what we have to do. We have politicians who rely upon their executive authority to enforce their will. But how many genuine leaders do we have in America? Whether you're for President Trump or against him, and if you're against him, I don't really know what you're doing here, but the fact is, the reason that Donald Trump became the president of the United States was, whether they expressed it out loud or not, the people of America are fed up with bosses and politicians. And Donald Trump became the president of the United States of America because millions upon millions upon millions of Americans all agreed on one point: that they were tired of bosses, that they were tired of the standard politician, that instead they wanted leadership. Yes, that's what Donald Trump offered the American people a year and a half ago or so, is he offered them leadership. He didn't just say, well, I'm going to be in charge and you have to do what I say. Or he didn't do the typical politician role where I'm going to offer you free stuff, and I'm going to be the guy who offers you the most free stuff, so vote for me. He was not a typical politician. And he is still governing as not a typical politician. He is governing as a leader, which has many people, the typical Washington insiders and the media pundits and so forth, they don't know how to deal with it. Because all of their lives, they've dealt with a standard cookie cutter type politician. A politician who panders to the people, who doesn't inspire leadership. We haven't had a genuine leader as a president since Ronald Reagan left office. What we've had is politicians who put their finger in the air and they decide what's going to be popular. And then when they figure out what they think will be popular, that's where they govern from. A position of, who wants what, or middle of the road so I don't offend anyone. That's not how leaders behave. Leaders are not people who put their finger in the air and decide what's popular and go that direction. A leader knows that there's a mission that needs to be accomplished. And a leader understands that the priority is to accomplish that mission, not to worry about people's feelings. Now, a leader doesn't go out and deliberately hurt people's feelings, but a leader doesn't change his position based upon how certain people may or may not feel. Because if you do that, you're completely ineffective as a leader. You cannot be an effective leader if you're constantly worried that your choices are going to hurt someone's feelings. A leader looks at the mission and says, okay, this is the mission, whatever it happens to be. Maybe your mission is you have to manufacture and produce X thousand number of widgets, and you have to ship and deliver them by a certain date. That's your mission. Well, the leader doesn't say, well, we promised the client and the customer that we'd have X thousand widgets delivered to them by this date, but I know a lot of you guys have other stuff to do, and I don't want to rush you, and I don't want you to feel like I'm bossy or telling you what to do. No, a leader says, hey, everyone, this is our mission, and this is the plan to accomplish this mission, and I'm going to monitor you guys. I'm going to monitor your progress, and we're going to get this done. Now, it may not be that explicit. It may be other things. But if you're a parent, you're supposed to be a leader. You're supposed to set the example. And that's something that leaders do, is they set the example for the troops or the people that they are leading. And as a parent, you set the example for your children. So I really do genuinely believe that one of my missions in life is to help you and all the people that I encounter to be a better leader, not to necessarily be a boss, or especially not to be a politician, but to be a leader. Because for the United States of America, and you may be listening to this somewhere else, but at least for the United States of America, for us to succeed, for us to, grow and to, I guess, get back to where the greatness that we once were, we're going to need leaders. People who aren't concerned about hurting feelings, people who aren't concerned about political correctness, and people who aren't concerned about just being in charge. Because it's easy to say, I'm a boss, and if you don't do what I said, I'm going to punish you, or I'm going to fire you, or whatever. That's not a leader. We have politicians that are like, well, if you don't do what I say, you peasants don't do what we say, we're going to send out men with guns, and we're going to force you to do it. That's not what a leader does. Leaders don't have to force you at gunpoint. Leaders don't have to threaten you. And in the United States of America, we desperately need more leaders on every level. Like I said, when you're a leader, you don't start out necessarily with 100 or 1,000 people. You may start out with just a couple, just a few. And that's what, so they do in the Marine Corps. That's what they do in the military. They start you out small. You're in charge of, 2 or 3 or 4 people, then a squad, then a platoon, then a company. And if you're never in the military, but squads are smaller and platoons and so on and so forth. Battalion, a regiment, an army, what have you. But you don't get that overnight. So what we're going to do, and I wanted to kind of, set this up with this episode, is for the next 14 days, I'm going to focus on the United States Marine Corps leadership traits one at a time per show. And what I would suggest, if you are genuinely serious about becoming a leader, and you say, well, Paul, I'm not really in that position right now. I'm just a worker. I just, have a job. I'm not in a position to be a leader. I bet you that you are. I bet you that in some way or some area of your life that you can be an effective leader, whether it's as a coach, whether it's a parent, whether it's just being a leader to your friends or your peer group. Everyone has an opportunity to be an effective leader. And what we're going to focus on for the next 14 days is ways that you can improve your leadership traits and you can be a better leader to those around you. All right, that's it. And if you would like to avail yourself to the written work of yours truly, Paul G. Markel, you can go to Amazon.com and shop around, and you can pick up any of the books by myself in either paperback form or Kindle form. All right, guys, I'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you for spending time with us today. To get show notes, submit a topic request, and for more from your host, Paul G. Markel, visit morningmindsetpodcast.com. That's morningmindsetpodcast.com. Please leave a review for this podcast on your favorite podcast player. We appreciate your time and effort, and we look forward to reading your honest feedback.